Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 11 of the Camano Voice. On this episode, I speak to the owner of the Bake Cafe here on Camano Island at Camano Commons, Jesse Childress. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode. On this episode, Jesse and I dive into a lot of the background behind hamburgers, and it was really fascinating to me as someone who is a huge fan of hamburgers and cheeseburgers and any sort of burger, to hear some of the history behind how they got started and why Jesse creates the burgers he does and why he tries to limit customization on those burgers. So we dive into all of that plus more. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Jesse Childress. Hey Islanders, it's Brandon with the Camano Voice, and today I'm here with the owner of the Bake Cafe on Camano Island, Jesse Childress. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's way too energetic, by the way. But, hi.
All right. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Jesse.
I'd say there's not much, but there's probably more than that. But I'm just a guy who's lived out here a few years now on the island. Kind of lived in the Arlington-Stanwood area for most coming up. From high school on, and I've got my wife Lisa and two kids, Caleb and Georgia, and they are an integral part of my life, and I have a restaurant here.
Nice.
So that's me in a nutshell. I'm sure there's more.
Good nutshell. All right. So to start off with, where did you go to school, and what was your degree in?
I went to Linfield College in McMinnville, Oregon, and my degree was a business management, actually.
Okay. So then what was the plan for that degree?
I didn't exactly have a plan. I was always interested in the arts, did a lot in music and art department, things like that. My business advisor always said I was his art student who got lost in the business department on the way to the art lab. So I knew that I was able to draw things, paint things, sculpt things, play music. All those things came kind of naturally. It was always great to hone them and learn from other people and get better at them. But I also knew that I needed to know about business, know how things work, know how to get myself out there, how to make money, how to use money, how to manage money. I didn't know how to do any of that. So I went to business school, and it just seemed to make sense. I was pretty dead set against ever working for anyone, like right out of college. I bought some real estate, started building properties, got quite a few of those built by the time everything collapsed, 2008.
Oh,
so
no.
Took a pretty good dive there. And then...
and what area was that in?
I did a lot in Everett, North Everett specifically, just building condos down there. We would buy lots if they had a house on it, plowed it, put fourplex on there or threeplex or whatever. And when all that went south, I got a regular job working for Penske. Somewhere in between there, I was also a loan officer for a little while too, a couple of years, but doing both at the same time, housing and loans. It didn't work out too well. So I went to work for somebody, worked for Penske for 6 years or 7 years, maybe not even that long. I can't recall anymore. It was only 4 years, 2010 to 2014. And then...
So what were you doing for Penske? Just driving? Or?
No. I was a branch rental manager. Was my last thing I did down at First Avenue South in Spokane location in Seattle, which was like the busiest or the second busiest branch in the country. We would go back and forth between D.C. and us. So that was a hoot for a long time. Then I went to work for a State Farm agent down in Bothell and got on a track to become a agent for State Farm. They call it their aspirant program. I went through all of that over the next 3 years, 4 years, just about 3 to 4 years. And I got all the way through the program. Actually, I got all the way to what they called site ready or site interview ready, which basically meant I'd pick a spot and they would decide whether or not I should be in that spot and then go. I made it through everything. And one day just kind of decided I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't handle it. I didn't like it.
So how did you
It was
get
fun,
connected?
but-
How did you get connected into the insurance? Was that someone from Penske?
You know, oddly, I was having a beer with a buddy of mine who I worked with at Penske for up at the Everett branch before I was the rental manager down in Seattle. And he said, I got this buddy who's a State Farm agent. He loves it. You know, you're a sales guy. You've always been doing sales. You'd probably fit in really well. Why don't you talk to him? So I said, yeah, why don't you hook me up with that guy? I went and sat with him, interviewed really for like an hour or so. He didn't really have a position, but they're always looking for people and stuff. So at the end of it, he basically said, I don't need anyone right now, but I have a friend who's always looking. And that guy, his name is Chris Jones. He's down in Bothell. And I talked with Chris. I kind of meshed with the team, and they said, all right, you could come work here. So I put in my notice at Penske. I spent 2 weeks studying and getting all my insurance licensing and all of that stuff done. And then I went to work at Chris, and yeah, the rest was kind of what I told earlier.
Yeah, well, and it, like, if you're working with insurance, you kind of, I guess you're working under that, whoever the main agent is, right?
Yeah,
But
so
you kind of get to operate a little.
Yeah, the way that that it works is you operate under the agent's license, that they're an agent. But as far as licensing goes, there's no difference between just a regular producer that works for an agent or an agent. You know, it depends on how far you want to go down the licensing path, but we all had the same thing. So you're an insurance agent, you know, air quotes there. But yeah, you work for him, who's a contractor for State Farm, basically. State Farm's a little different than a lot of the other insurance agencies, where you don't just buy a book of business and they let you go do whatever you want. You have to go through their program. They basically pick you to go where they want you to go, or you have choice there as well. But you know, they kind of groom you up from the beginning. So it's the way I like to do things. I don't like to just jump in and wave my arms around and wonder what I'm doing for a while. Although that might seem like what I do here most of the time. But
I was going to say, you pretty much jumped into the bake.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, let's go ahead and switch over. Let's jump into that. So when you started the Bake Cafe, you actually found us, which is fairly unusual as far as for us when we're looking at tenants, stuff like that. Like, usually it's us, myself, going out and talking to different business owners, restaurant owners.
Right.
But I remember I was passing through the marketplace, and one of our managers said, "Hey, this guy's interested in the space over here. You want to talk to him?" And I was like, "Sure." And you had already been kind of checking it out. And so you transitioned from the insurance, and did you just end that and then start looking for another career, or what was that?
No, I took the more underhanded approach, if you will. I kept working insurance for a little while. I had no real intention of ever opening a restaurant, and in fact, it's something people have always told me: you should do this, open a restaurant, it'd be great, blah blah blah. And it's like, you know, when your friends tell you can sing, but you really can't. It's kind of that kind of thing. And I'm a little bit of a realist. I'm like, I'm not a chef. Like, I don't know how restaurants work. You know, I can cook pretty well in a home kitchen setting and everything. So I've just always looked at the idea as ridiculous. Plus, restaurants, you know, failure rate on restaurants is crazy, and I might not be the most risk-averse person out there, but I'm also, like, I take risks that I think are going to work. and I never really thought a restaurant would work out. And there's still time to find out if that works out or not. But yeah, I had no intention of doing it, and I was making burgers at home one night and just playing with kind of, recipes, if you will, different techniques of making burgers. And I came here to grab some meat at Del Fox to go home and grind and make some burgers on like a Saturday or Sunday morning. And there was no Del Fox. And I thought that was odd because I didn't come here that often, but every couple weeks my son and I would come in, and I wasn't here longer than like 3 weeks earlier than that, and they were there. I think this was like early January or something like that. So it was Lindsay that was there.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, what's going on with this? And they're like, oh, we're going to put a restaurant there. And I'm like, well, what? And she goes, it's going to be food. And I was like, okay, so who do I talk to? And she looked at me and was like, what do you mean, who do you talk to? And I go, well, I might be interested in doing something there, so who do I talk to? And she ran around, got me Jeff's card, and then, yeah, everything kind of went from there. So it was, a 3-month process to kind of get the ball rolling in that direction. I took the investment that I was going to make in the State Farm business and put it into here. And me and my partner, Nate, spent, I think, first week of April we got in. We spent all of April and May building, and then, June 1st we opened. So
Yeah. How did you and Nate get connected?
I've known Nate since high school. He and I went to the same school together. He was a year under me.
Okay.
We've been friends ever since. So.
Yeah.
But,
well, and I know one of the big things is when we do talk to different tenants and stuff, like, I just remember, like, my dad was telling me, like, normally we're kind of pushing the ball and we're like, okay, have they got us this? Have they got us this? Mm-hmm. And it was completely opposite when we were working with you guys, because he kept coming to me and being like, so he's already given us this, this, and this, and he's asking about, like, this next step. Can we get started on that yet?
Right.
And so that was, it's encouraging for our side to be like, wow, this guy's really, like, he's with it because he's trying to get this thing moving. So.
Yeah, I don't like to beat around the bush or waste a lot of time with things. Like, once I decide to do stuff, I'm doing it. And I usually get things together pretty quickly and go from there. So it's, I do jump in with both feet pretty quickly on a lot of things.
Once you make the decision.
Exactly.
Like, all right,
the hard part is making the decision. Definitely family was involved, talking to my wife a bunch about it. Getting, to know that was something that was okay, that she's willing to commit with that, because it's a huge commitment. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge commitment with no return for a while. There's no money in the restaurant business for a few years. It takes a while to get that going. And so we had to both be ready for that. And
the time commitment, because when you first started, it was you. And so you were here all 7 days a week.
Yeah, it was me and Nate. But yeah, we were both here 7 days a week for 10 or 12 hours a day, just to build out the place and get it ready for a month and a half. So towards the end, we pretty much had it done, and it was just waiting on the health department, which drove me crazy.
So, all right. So then. Everyone is kind of like used to like fast food or like regular restaurants where you order your food and you can be like, well, I'd like to get the burger, but can I get it with this and not that or this? I want you to dive into your philosophy of why you serve your burgers as is and don't allow customization.
Well, we do allow a little bit of customization, and I guess I'm loosening up more and more on that, because I've been tired of trying to explain to people every time the hows and the whys and all of that stuff. But it's a very specific flavor profile that our burgers have. And, it's a representation of me and my creativity. And I think it's maybe a different approach than most people take with food. I love my customers, I love the people, I love the interaction and everything, but it's also an expression of me, and I'm a little stubborn on that maybe. But the real reason behind the burgers is I went down a weird road a couple years back where I really dive into things and study them and go pretty deep. And I came across a guy named George Motes, who is also kind of like me. He's very creative. He has a production company. He's a photographer, all that kind of stuff. But he also has like a knack for the history of things, and he really dove into the history of the American hamburger, and he wrote a book called Hamburger America, which kind of takes you through all the real legendary burgers in the country. And I found out it's very regional. You have the burger belt that's kind of like from Oklahoma and central Texas that heads pretty much northeast. Cincinnati, Ohio, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there, Louis' Lunch was the first place that ever served what's known as a hamburger today. And they took what was called a hamburger steak and slapped it between two pieces of toast. And the way they do it today still is there's an onion round on there, and they cook it in these weird vertical broilers so you can't put cheese on it. So it's just a burger with an onion round kind of pressed into it and grilled vertically in these broilers. And then the only topping that they allow in the restaurant, at least up until recently, was they would put a tomato slice on it if they were fresh and in season, and then they had mustard. And the whole reason behind that was burgers really came into fashion in this country in like the 20s and 30s. It is kind of like the heyday of burgers, and there was no refrigeration commonly available, so you couldn't transport produce across the country. So the places that ended up coming out with burgers with lettuce and tomatoes and all of that, the garden toppings, if you will, were on the coasts because they could get, California and Florida could grow produce, but the middle of the country, you had a small section of time where those things were available. So most places, pickles, onions, and mustard were things that didn't require refrigeration and were prevalent. Mm-hmm. So that was where I started. And, we all had this concept of, a big, good burger is this giant thing with lettuce, tomato, onions, jalapenos,
whatever else,
aged cheeses, and things like that. But it turns out when you just simplify it and you cut all that stuff out, you just let the beef and the bun really shine. And then the pickles and onions and mustard complement the fat content and the things in there. So, I got really nerdy about it. To answer your question in a very, very, very short paragraph, I nerded out, and I found out that the best way to do a burger was smash it on a griddle, throw some really good quality American cheese on it, which I know people like to look at it and go, that's not real cheese. It is. Read the ingredients on our cheese. We use Hilldale American cheese, and it's cheese. It is processed, and that processing is basically shredding actual cheese, cheddar cheese, and adding a little bit of condensed milk or evaporated milk, I can't remember which one, and then letting it solidify into the block that it becomes. So it's cheese with 100% dairy product. There's nothing else in it. But that just turned out to be the best way to have a burger, and in my opinion, and I think a lot of people have started to agree with that. Get rid of all the other stuff and focus on good quality beef. We use local fresh beef that's all USDA prime, hormone free, antibiotic free. We grind it fresh every morning. We take an entire chuck shoulder, we cut it up, throw it in the grinder,
which is why he sometimes runs out.
Which is why we run out, because we only grind one shoulder a day. Saturdays we're actually starting to grind two, but we're still running out. That, and we can only make so many buns a day.
Right.
We're limited by our capacity of what we can make. So
well, and I think that the reason so many other, whether it's franchises or even other burger restaurants, end up having to do. End up throwing all the condiments and everything else, extra things on a burger and stuff, is because they don't have the same quality of beef. It's not freshly ground.
Right.
So the quality of the beef's not there. So
You
they
can
don't
mask that.
They don't
with
want you to
other
focus on
ingredients,
that. And the buns are usually frozen buns from wherever they can find them.
Right.
So again, they don't want you focusing on the bun. They want you focusing on what they threw on top of it to make it something else.
Yeah, and that's been something. The mid 2000s, things got weird with burgers. Is when like all the hotshot chefs started like coming out and I can make a burger, and they got all these super fancy burgers, which is where the whole gourmet burger thing just started going out of control, and it was about 3 years ago. I don't know what happened, but it's like everybody had this idea all at the same time, and I follow a lot of people in the burger world, if you will. We all kind of went, you know what? Let's get back to simple. Smash a high quality beef on a real hot griddle and just let it get nice and crispy, and throw it on a good fresh bun, and don't mess with it with a lot of things. And that it's happening all over the place. I mean, there was just an article in Bon Appetit about, it was titled "Thin is In." And these smash burgers are kind of taking the country by storm again. It's funny because we're repeating history. We're going back to 1946 right now. But people taste them and they're like, "Wow, this is the best burger I've ever had." And it's like, have you not traveled around or had just a good old fashioned hamburger before? Which kind of surprised me because the burgers were a complete afterthought. They were a reason to stay open past noon because the whole idea is a breakfast place anyway. Which kind of started with me smashing burgers, but I never really wanted to do a burger place. We were focused on the breakfast sandwiches, which we still are. I mean, we still make quite a few breakfast sandwiches a day, but
burgers took off.
Yeah, burgers took off, and I didn't expect it actually. It was funny because at the very beginning we did these. We called our cheeseburger, and it was a 2 ounce patties, so it was like a double cheeseburger, and the whole idea was that it was just more surface area to smash and get that Maillard reaction, that griddle crunch that you get on our burgers, and a little bit more cheese. And people kept coming up looking at the menu saying, "Well, I don't want a double. I just want a single." And so we'd give them a single with 1 2 ounce patty, and it was too much bun. And they, the complaints that we heard, and I can't say complaints because we asked people to give us their opinions and everything, was that this 2 ounce patty's not going to fly. And I was like, well, it wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be 4 ounces of beef from the get-go. So we messed around with bun size, try and get things right. We upped the patty size to like 3.5, and then finally we brought it up to the full quarter pound, what it is now. And then everyone's like, this is good. And so I'm sitting here going, a little face palm there sometimes, like this was the right amount of meat from the beginning that we tried, but this is what people wanted, so this is what we stuck with. It was kind of funny how that ended up. But.
Well, I didn't know a lot of the history about hamburgers. I mean, if you ask my wife, like, whenever she's like, well, if there's a go-to meal for me, it's hamburger, always. So any night that she's like, I don't know what to make, she's like, I could make hamburger and he'd be happy every night.
Yeah, I mean, I can always eat a burger. I think most people could pretty much always eat a burger.
Well, and I think the other thing is that there's so many places that have created, that you can go get a burger now, but it's hard to find like what you've created now, a high quality, just great burger. Right. There's times where if you watch cooking shows or something, you see a really good burger or something, you're like, oh, that's what I want to get. And then you're like, so what do I have? I've got McDonald's down the road. I got burger. You're like, there's no place to get a real good burger. And now the fact that it's right below where in the same building I work, it's very dangerous. But I really there's so many days that I end up getting a burger instead of my lunch because it's I walk by to go get my lunch and I'm like, no, I think I'll just get a burger.
No, I get. I mean, I'm the same way with things. I've worked in places where I always loved a good banh mi sandwich or something along those lines, and places I worked are right next door to some of the best. I don't know. I can't say really the best in the country, but definitely some of the best in the area. Literally right next door to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can just walk in my door or walk out my door, walk in their door, and yeah, I'd sit there. I know I have lunch in the fridge, but I get that.
Yeah, no, so that's been, I mean, yeah, I for sure when you guys first opened and I was like, all right, I'm going to get a burger. And it was like, oh, there's not, like, it's just all that it is like the onion, mustard, and pickles. And but then I ate it. I was like, wow, I don't think I've had a burger like that before.
Yeah, it's really funny, and still a lot of people, that live out here, locals, still don't know we're here, and they're coming in for their first time, and we hand them a burger, and they look at us, and they're like, "That's it. Where's the lettuce and tomato?" And I go, "Oh, we don't do that." I think to this day, I've had about 3 people actually walk out of the restaurant because we don't do lettuce and tomato, and it's fine with me. I understand that, but I would wish to see people like step out of their comfort zone a little bit and give it a try. And then if you try it and you legitimately don't like it, that's fine. I think it's always been the thing where I'm always willing to try something. So when I see somebody who's not willing to try something, it, as a business owner, it frustrates me a little bit, but I understand I've pigeonholed myself into this spot, so it's not that big a deal for me. But it's just odd to me that some people aren't willing to try things. And, I get it, but it is a little bit weird.
Yeah.
But I think that's most people's reaction after they have it. They're like, wow, this is really good. This is simple. This doesn't have all this stuff that you really don't need on there.
Yeah.
And look, I eat burgers with lettuce and tomato on there sometimes. It's not like
it's out, guys.
right? It's not that I hate them. One of the things I do know is the first thing I'm going to yank off a burger is the tomato. I'm going to take one bite and I'm going to go, that tomato's out of season. It doesn't taste like a tomato. It just adds a lot of wet, mealy slime to a burger. Exactly. It doesn't do anything for it. And so, I'll usually give it a shot with the tomato if it's served to me that way. And then if I don't think the tomato's good, I'll take it off. Lettuce for me it adds very little. Even if you go with like a butter lettuce or a leafy lettuce or something with a little more flavor than iceberg, it doesn't add a lot. If you do it right and you get the iceberg on there, it adds a little crunch. So it brings some texture to it, and it does add some flavor, but it's like you said earlier, it just kind of takes away from the beef and the bun and everything else, and that's really what we're trying to showcase, is that a good quality bun with good quality beef and good quality cheese put together very simply can be very good.
Yeah. So now we've talked about that. I want to jump into the series you did on the Bob's Burgers cookbook, which is opposite of what we were just talking about.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
They were. It was so much fun as you were going through them. What was kind of your inspiration for that?
And we're still doing that, by the way. Every Friday we're doing a burger out of Bob's Burger, and the inspiration was literally just Bob's Burgers. When I first started this, a lot of people were like, "Wow, you're Bob," and I was like, maybe not. And I started watching it. I'd never actually watched Bob's Burgers before. I started watching it, and I'm like, wow, this is... I mean, obviously, there's plenty of cartoon things that happen that just aren't realistic in real life. But at the same time, I'm watching this, and I was like, this is very strikingly similar. And I bought the Bob's Burger cookbook on a whim, I don't know, 8 months ago or so. We didn't have it when we first started, but I bought it just as something fun for people to look through and whatnot when we were in there. And I also brought Motz's 2 books in, Hamburger America and his, I can't remember what the cookbook's called, but it's the American Hamburger or something to that effect. And I got the Bob's Burger book in at the same time, and we started thumbing through it. And then when Naked City closed down, Chef John from over there came over to work for me for a few days a week, and we're thumbing through the book, and we had talked about doing this Bob's Burger thing. And then when he got on there, I had some help, a little more firepower in the kitchen. You know, it's tough when it's one or two people there all the time to pull off all these specials. And we were doing the weekly special before that for a long time that either came from something regional out of Motz's book. You know, we kind of explored the Midwest and a few other things. And then we did a lot of our own creations as well. And I was getting tired. You know, mentally, the having to think about a new thing all the time gets a little tough after a while. And just looking at the Bob's Burgers book, I was like, well, why don't we try and make a few of these? I did make one before, or two, actually. I made the Eggers Can't Be Cheesers and the Pickle My Funny Bone burger as specials, weekly specials, a while back. So yeah, that as far as inspiration goes, it was literally just a cookbook that I had that were like, why don't we find out if these are good? Because those other two that I did were actually pretty good. So we did the week of Bob's Burgers, which was a new burger a day. And we did, I think we actually ended up doing 8 burgers. I can't remember them all, but there was the final Kraut Down was the last one we did, which was just a burger with sauerkraut and Swiss cheese, basically. I am blanking on all of the rest of them. Home for the Holidays with the challah bun, some potato latkes, applesauce, sour cream. You know,
Was
just
the
all
Brussels
these.
sprout one? Was
The
that
Brussels
during that
sprout
week?
one, I think, was actually
on.
after that. We did that one later on, which was also great. The Do the Brussels, and it was Brussels sprouts and bacon and
And they were all like
yeah,
grilled, and so they're fried. And
exactly.
then,
They're all
they
a
were
little
so good.
crispy and delicious. We did the a good manchego is hard to find, which was manchego cheese with like a bacon jam on it, and yeah, all of these burgers. Every time we had one, we're like, wow, that's really good. The Bet It All on Black Garlic burger was probably the one that like sold out the quickest for sure.
Yeah.
I think we sold it out completely in like 20 minutes from when we released it. And then we went over to Brooklyn Brothers and begged for more mozzarella cheese. Borrowed enough to do like 6 more burgers and sold through those in like another hour or so. So yeah, about an hour and a half or so total time to sell through everything we had, which isn't a ton. When we do the specials, we only make enough for like 10 or 12 of them. But I think we sold almost 20 of those black garlic burgers in like an hour and a half.
Any chance of that one coming back?
Probably. I still have a bunch of black garlic. We might do it once we're done with the. I really kind of want to cook all the way through the book. And
Okay.
It's really just try and find something bad.
Yeah.
They're all good. Some of them are better than others. Some of them were just duds. I think the one we did on a whole grain bun with kale. I can't remember what the burger's called, but it was on a whole grain bun with kale, so that kind of speaks for itself. I think we only sold 3 or so of those. It wasn't a big hit. Had a lot of whole grain buns that went bad. But no, we're going to keep going. My favorite one is still the Bet It All on Black Garlic. It just had a really interesting flavor profile.
When you made like a special sauce for it and everything, right?
Yeah, it had a black garlic mayo. That was like
That's
black
right.
garlic and sriracha, so it was a little spicy. Okay. The black garlic, if you don't know what that is, it's like a aged fermented garlic that is literally black, and it's got a consistency of tar, so it's really hard to work with. But it's really sweet and like just a really condensed garlic flavor. Like imagine roasted garlic, but like 10 times more intense.
Yeah.
Is kind of what it is. So.
All right. So, are there any exciting projects or things that you're working on with the Bake Cafe that we should be aware of coming up?
Exciting projects right now are just trying to survive. We've had some incidences where pretty much everyone's been injured or one way or another incapacitated over the last couple of weeks. So we're just trying to get by right now. But I always have like this pie in the sky like plan of doing stuff. Like I just bought this big 36-inch Blackstone griddle, which is basically like the griddle that we have in the restaurant, but it's mobile. And I would like to, and don't hold me to this if it doesn't happen. But we're doing the Cars and Coffee right now, and for kind of a final summer, maybe the mid-September one, to do like a pancake feed or something like that outside, where we kind of take over the whole parking lot and just do something like that. Maybe do a fundraiser or something. I really kind of, the whole Freedom Park thing is something that I like to see continue, and I know we're always in peril on that one with funding because it's a private park. It's a lot of people have no idea that it's not a city funded deal. And it's a great place, but
and it really adds to the island.
Yeah, it adds to the island and everything, but it costs a lot to keep it up, and taxes and maintenance and everything is a lot. So I really do want to do a thing for that. So I'm thinking that would be something we'd do.
Yeah.
And then other than that, I'd love to kind of do some stuff outside here. I keep like gesturing towards the middle, but you can't see me. But like some movies or something like that. And we've talked about
done that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked about it too with the Brooklyn Brothers guys, and it's really hard to do all of these things and have real life and run a business at the same time and manage everything. So I kind of feel like really busy but not productive all the time, which drives me crazy.
I think that's most business owners feel that.
Yeah,
feel
exactly.
like a hamster on a wheel. Instead of like moving forward, you're just spinning the wheel.
Exactly. It just doesn't stop. I get home at the end of the day and I'm like, I'm exhausted and I have no energy left. But
and then your wife says, "What'd you do today?" And you're like,
most of the time I get home and she looks at me and says, "Well, what do I need to do?" My wife's great, actually. She's been really supportive of this, and she comes in late at night. Right now we're transitioning the baking over to Josh, so he's not going to be so much working the restaurant anymore, but full-time baking. We took on doing bread for Tapped, and we're also going to be doing some bread for Sale, which is a new brewery that's opening up in Stanwood here pretty soon. So we're taking on more
like wholesale.
More wholesale kind of stuff,
That's
which
excellent.
means we have to have a full-time baker, whereas before we've always just kind of baked when we could fit it in, which is an interesting transition because you're taking a guy who's, does everything, counter, cooks, cleans, does all these things, and asking him to just focus on one thing.
Right.
And then we have to adjust to that. So, and my wife's going to start working again here over next week. She's going back. She's going to teaching again. Which means that we can't use her to help around here. So, trying to figure out the labor to fill that gap
Well, that's great.
is difficult.
I mean, it's a good problem to have.
Exactly. It's not the worst in the world.
Yeah.
It's going to take some transition and everything. So.
Yeah. I mean, I can say for myself and for everyone that I've talked to that goes to Bake Cafe, and of course, like my brother-in-law is like, Jesse's a genius with. He's like, everything he makes is just amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm really not though. A lot of what I do is stuff that I picked up because I would call myself almost a super nerd when it comes to things like that. So I've just dug deep and really stole a bunch of ideas from other people that have already done it.
Yeah, but of course that's is part of it. Like not many people go that far back to get to the roots of burgers.
That's true.
All right, so I always end the podcast with some rapid fire questions.
All right.
So we'll just jump into it. Do you have a lesser known or favorite location on Camano Island that you like to hang out?
Two places I like to hang out. One, if you know me at all, I hang out at Ale Spike Brewery down by the airport. Chris and Lena run the place. It's great. They make great beer. I have to stay away because beer makes me fat, but I love beer, and I always love the company. There's always a good group of people there, it's just a nice place to end a week. Just hang out, sit there, have a couple beers, and eat one of Kenny's hot dogs. The other thing, I love being out on pretty much any of the water around here. I go out off of Utsalati a lot, go crabbing or whatever, take the kids out. I don't personally own a boat, but I have friends with boats, and also people who like to go crabbing a lot. So there's always an opportunity to jump in a boat and run out there.
Yeah. All right. Pretend you have a friend from out of town coming into town. What would their first day look like here?
Is this permanently, or is this just like vacation?
Just vacation. They're coming to visit, and you're just trying to show them a representation of Camano.
I like to bring a lot of people down to the state park. I think that's, kind of gets a good variety of on the way down there, shows a lot of the island. Definitely take them out here. I think Terry's Corner is great. The whole Commons area is a great place to hang out. And then from there, I usually take someone to Ale Spike or whatever. We'd go out that way. Iverson Beach. People are always coming in wondering where to go or what to do around here, right. And it's tough because we only have 3 or 4 real public accessible beaches. The rest of it is private, but they're great beaches. They're great places to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that Camo Beach is always cool. All the state park stuff really.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Who is the most interesting person in this community that I should interview next?
That's a good question because there's a ton of interesting people out here.
Mm-hmm. You can give a list too if you think of a lot of people.
Let's see, man. Anytime I'm faced with like giving a list or something, I just blank unless I have something right off the bat. I definitely think that I mentioned their names earlier, Chris and Lena. They're a hoot. They're fun. And perhaps it's just because our sense of humor is kind of meshed together. Also, really what I've found interesting are just the people that hang out here. If you hang out here all day long, you'll notice there's about 20 or so people that are almost always here. Mm-hmm. You got Chuck and Ken and Bill and Bev and all of those crowds that I've found to be very interesting. I've also met a lot of people through doing the Cars and Coffee, and forgive me if you're listening to this, but I don't remember half of people's names because I'm terrible with names. But there's John and Ryan, Lance, Wayne, just people that have had interesting history with cars. I've always loved cars. I've been fascinated by cars, and that kind of, to me, that's why I do the Cars and Coffee, because I don't have time to go down to Redmond Town Center or go even to Marysville or anything like that on those ones. And plus, I've always just thought this place lends itself on a Saturday morning. It's usually not too busy before 10 o'clock, so if we get in and take over, and people actually seem to enjoy it. So
yeah, well, and your very first one you did, it was you had a lot more people, because I think it was like a week before. You're like, well, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Yeah, I'm just going to put it out there and see what. And a lot of quite a few people showed up to the very first one. So I think that proved that you were onto something. Yeah,
it definitely did. I think we had like 30, 35 cars in total that showed up on that first one.
Yeah,
it's just kind of grown since. Sometimes we have. I think the most cars we've ever had out there at one time was 38. And I think it was like 42 if I include the motorcycles. But then, we start at 7 and end at 10, so there's usually a chance for people to cycle in and out. So, we'll have 38 there all at once and 10 or 15 of them that have left and more come. So, I'm calling it a solid 50. Yeah. That seems to be the norm.
Yeah.
And it's different people that show up every time, or people that have multiple cars and come out with different cars every time. So, it's fun.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. All right, lastly, if you could have a message on a billboard on Camano Island right as you're driving onto the island, what would it say?
I would love it to say, come check out the Bake Cafe.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I think yes, I want a sign out that people can see off the road. That would be awesome. But really, just enjoy yourself. Look around. It'd say way too much to drive by. So just enjoy your time out here. It's but don't move out here because we're full.
That was one of my previous guests, Mike Nestor, mentioned that. He's like, enjoy the island, but don't let the door hit you on the way out.
No, it's funny because it's one of these little communities that I'm a newcomer here. I've only been here for 4 years now. I did grow up, like I said, between Arlington and Arlington's where I did most of my growing up, and then I moved out to Stanwood. So I've always come out to Camano, and then I've always left. But I got married 12 years ago, and there's a little debate on whether that's correct or not right now. But my parents moved out to Camano basically right after I moved out, got married and everything, and they've been out here ever since. And just in the last 12 years, this place has exploded.
Right.
And I remember it even from when I was in high school, just being super rural. I remember when this whole Terry's Corner thing was built in the way that it was.
Yeah.
It's and that's not very long ago, but it's really exploded. So.
Right.
Not that we don't like more people coming, and not that I can really stand and say anything since I'm fairly new myself. But it is getting a little crowded out here. And that's our, what's charming about it is it's kind of small and a tight community. I think that's what's really great about it. So enjoy your time, enjoy the beaches, enjoy the people, and get out and try some food too. There's actually a bunch of great places out here. We got Tapped that just opened. We've got the Rockaway, the Camano Beach Cafe, the Elder Base, or I forget it's Kara's Kitchen down there, and then you have Tai all the way down. In fact, somebody was just telling me about their pastrami down there, which kind of hits close to home because we're always doing pastrami here now. But I got to get down and try that.
Yeah.
And if I'm forgetting someone, I'm sure I'll get called out on it. But
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, I feel like I'm looking at the timer here. It's 45 minutes and 54 seconds of me rambling, so I apologize if I got rambly.
No, it was really interesting. I love the history on the burgers and why I love hearing kind of the background of why people create the restaurant, create their creations the way they choose to do, because there's always a reason. It's never just like people throw it out there and just like, well, that's what I decided to do. There's always more behind it, so I love hearing that.
Yeah, and I think it also had something to do with you go to any place that serves a burger, and a burger comes with lettuce and tomato, and pickles and onions are usually on the side, and then they don't serve any condiments on there because they're afraid to, put whatever's on there. You don't want people afraid to eat the burger if they don't like mustard or whatever it is. And so it was important to me to be a little different too, on top of being historically accurate and kind of going the way that it used to be done. Be a little different. There was lots of pushback at the beginning. No lettuce and tomato. What are you talking about? I have a joke. I have a good customer, Ryan. I mentioned him earlier about cars. I was getting ready to. I saw him in line, and I actually had some tomatoes from the previous market day, and they handed me a Tupperware full of tomatoes to put on their burgers. So, we definitely had that, but just being different, I think, is what we're after.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for joining me on the
thanks
podcast
for having me. It was good to get away, good to talk for a little bit, and now we can, at 47 minutes, probably let everyone go about their day.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. And listeners, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Jesse Childress for joining us on the podcast today. And thank you for listening. If you haven't already, do yourself a favor, stop by the Bake Cafe and pick up one of their cheeseburgers. You will not regret it. Just wanted to throw that in there. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And for more information on this podcast or previous ones, go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.